The sound of Harper's phone buzzing at 3 in the morning was the first sign that my perfect marriage was built on quicksand. I rolled over in our king-sized bed, squinting at the blue glow illuminating my wife's face as she scrolled through what looked like old text messages. Her perfectly manicured fingers moved with the kind of urgency usually reserved for wedding emergencies, which, as Maine's most sought-after wedding planner, Harper dealt with regularly. "Another bride having a meltdown?" I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. Harper startled, quickly turning the phone face down against her silk pajamas. "Oh, you're awake. Sorry, honey, just checking tomorrow's schedule." At 3 a.m. Right. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Landon Voss, 31 years old, and I build beautiful things for a living. Landscape architecture might sound fancy, but I'm basically a glorified gardener with a college degree and an eye for making rich people's backyards look like magazine spreads. I've got dirt under my fingernails and calluses on my palms, even though my business now pulls in 6 figures a year. Success hasn't softened the edges that growing up in a trailer park carved into me. Harper, on the other hand, was born for the spotlight. 28, blonde in that expensive salon way, and blessed with the kind of smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. She'd built her wedding planning business from nothing, and now every socialite in 3 counties wanted Harper Voss to orchestrate their special day. We'd been married 18 months. The honeymoon phase should have lasted longer. "Landon," she said, her voice taking on that careful tone she used with difficult clients. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Do you ever think about your exes, like compare me to them?" I propped myself up on one elbow, studying her face in the darkness. "Not really. Why would I want to think about people I'm not with anymore?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I guess I'm just curious about how other people handle those feelings." "What feelings?" "Nothing. Never mind. Go back to sleep." But I was wide awake now, a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Harper had been different lately, distracted, secretive, always on her phone. I'd attributed it to wedding season stress, but something about this conversation felt off. The next morning, Harper was already gone when I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Meeting with the Ashford wedding party at 10. Brunch with the girls at noon. See you tonight. XOXO." I made coffee and tried to shake the weird feeling from the night before. Through our kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Partridge, our 70-something neighbor, already working in her garden. The woman was a one-person surveillance system for our entire street, and she waved when she caught me looking. My phone rang. Miles, my shop manager. "Boss, we've got a problem with the Morrison job. The irrigation system they wanted? Turns out their soil is basically concrete with delusions of grandeur." I laughed despite my mood. Miles had a way with words that could make a root canal sound entertaining. "I'll be there in an hour. Start drawing up alternatives." Work was my sanctuary. My landscape design studio occupied a converted barn behind our house, and the attached greenhouse was where I did my best thinking. I'd built the business from scratch, starting with basic lawn care and gradually working up to full property designs for people who had more money than sense. The Morrison job was typical. Wealthy couple from Boston who'd bought a charming farmhouse in Maine and wanted to transform 5 acres of stubborn New England soil into something that belonged in Southern California. I spent the morning sketching alternative irrigation plans and trying not to think about Harper's strange behavior. At exactly 12:15, my phone buzzed with a text from my wife. "Running late for brunch. The Ashford bride is having a meltdown about centerpieces." I didn't think much of it until Mrs. Partridge called 20 minutes later. "Landon, dear, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I saw Harper leave this morning around 9:30. She was dressed awfully nice for a work meeting." Mrs. Partridge had raised nosiness to an art form, but she wasn't malicious. If she was calling, she was genuinely concerned. "What do you mean?" "Well, she was wearing that red dress, the one from your anniversary dinner, and she spent an awful long time checking her makeup in the car mirror before she drove off." The knot in my stomach tightened. Harper owned probably 50 dresses suitable for client meetings. The red one was special, attractive, expensive, and definitely not her usual professional attire. I thanked Mrs. Partridge and tried to focus on work, but concentration was impossible. At 1:30, I decided to surprise Harper at brunch. She'd mentioned meeting the girls at Bella Vista, the upscale cafe downtown where all the local socialites gathered to gossip and show off their latest purchases. The drive into town gave me time to talk myself out of my suspicions. Harper was successful, beautiful, and ambitious. She'd chosen to marry me when she could have had anyone. I was being paranoid. Bella Vista occupied the ground floor of a restored Victorian mansion, all exposed brick and Edison bulb lighting. Through the large windows, I could see Harper sitting at a corner table with 3 other women, Kelsey, her business partner and best friend since college, Amanda, whose husband owned half the commercial real estate in town, and Jessica, a local photographer who worked most of Harper's weddings. I was about to go inside when Harper's voice carried through the open windows, clear as a bell. "I'm telling you, our honeymoon was a complete disaster. The whole time, I could only think about Colin. Even in bed, especially in bed. Landon's sweet, but he's just not Colin, you know?" The other women laughed like she'd told the funniest joke in the world. Kelsey leaned forward conspiratorially. "So why don't you just call him? You know he'd come running." "Because I'm married," Harper said, but her tone suggested she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. "Besides, Colin's engaged to that real estate agent from Portland. What's her name? Sandra?" "Stephanie," Amanda corrected. "And please, that engagement is about as solid as tissue paper. Colin Dray has never met a wedding ring he couldn't ignore." More laughter. My hands were shaking. Jessica raised her mimosa. To Harper's dilemma, married to a good man, but dreaming of a bad one. "Two impossible choices," Harper agreed, clinking glasses with her friends. I stood there for another 30 seconds, watching my wife laugh about our private life with her friends, before walking back to my truck. My hands were steady now, but something fundamental had shifted inside my chest. The anger was clean and cold, like winter air. When I got home, I went straight to my workshop and pulled Harper's old laptop from the storage closet. She'd upgraded to a newer model 6 months ago, but never wiped the old one. It took me 20 minutes to crack her password, Colin's Girl 2019, which she'd apparently never changed. The email history told the whole story. Harper and Colin Dray had been in contact for months, starting with innocent catching-up messages that gradually became more intimate. Colin was her college boyfriend, the one who'd broken her heart by cheating with her sorority sister. According to the emails, he'd reached out after seeing our wedding announcement in the local paper. The messages were like reading a manual for emotional infidelity. They started safe. Memories of college, updates on their careers, casual flirtation disguised as nostalgia. But by last month, they were exchanging photos and making plans to meet. I found hotel receipts in her email confirmations. The Lakeside Inn, about an hour north of town. 3 different dates over the past 6 weeks, always on days when Harper had told me she was meeting with out-of-town vendors. The most recent email was from yesterday. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Wear the red dress." C. I sat in my workshop until sunset, reading through months of correspondence between my wife and her ex-boyfriend. The anger had crystallized into something harder and more focused. Harper had made me into a joke, a placeholder, a safety net while she explored her options. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated exactly how creative I could be when properly motivated. When Harper came home that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine and her favorite takeout from the Italian place downtown. "This is a nice surprise," she said, kissing my cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume and guilt. "I thought we should talk," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. She sat down, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. "About what?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring, setting it on the table between us. "About Colin Dray." The color drained from Harper's face, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Lakeside Inn, 3 times in 6 weeks. The red dress you wore to meet him today while you were supposedly having a work crisis." I kept my voice level, almost conversational. "The emails, the photos, the plans you've been making." Harper's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Landon, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very good with words. But here's the thing, Harper. I'm not interested in explanations. I'm interested in solutions." I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at Mrs. Partridge's perfectly maintained garden. "You have 2 choices. You can end this thing with Colin, delete his contact information, and we can try to rebuild our marriage. Or what?" I turned back to face her, and I let her see exactly how angry I was. "Or you can pack your things and move in with him, but you don't get to keep me as your backup plan while you figure out what you want." Harper started crying then, the kind of pretty, delicate tears that had probably gotten her out of trouble her whole life. It didn't mean anything. It was just nostalgia. "I love you, Landon."
"No," I said quietly. "You love the idea of me. You love having a successful husband who worships the ground you walk on. But you don't love me enough to keep your legs closed when your ex-boyfriend comes calling." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I need time to think," she whispered.
Take all the time you need, but take it somewhere else. Harper packed a bag and left for Kelsey's house that night. I sat in my workshop until dawn, planning my next move, because if Harper wanted to play games, I was going to teach her the rules. Harper stayed at Kelsey's for 3 days. During that time, I did what I do best. I planned. My landscape architecture background had taught me that every successful project starts with understanding the terrain. You survey the land, identify the obstacles, and design around the existing conditions. Harper's affair was just another design challenge, and I had every intention of creating something beautiful from the wreckage of our marriage. The first step was intelligence gathering. Colin Dray wasn't hard to research. His real estate company had a flashy website full of photos showing him in expensive suits, standing in front of sold signs with that practiced smile that probably worked on lonely housewives and recent divorcees. He specialized in luxury properties, which meant he dealt with people who had money and secrets. According to his social media, Colin was engaged to Stephanie Morrison, a pretty brunette who sold commercial properties in Portland. They'd been together for 2 years, and judging by her Instagram posts, she was completely devoted to him. Lots of couple photos, hearts, and kissy face emojis, countdown posts to their wedding next spring. Poor Stephanie had no idea her fiancé was screwing around with married women in cheap motels. I spent Tuesday morning creating a fake email account and a burner phone number through one of those online services. Then I drove to the Lakeside Inn and had a conversation with Brenda, the day manager who'd been working there since the Carter administration. I'm trying to surprise my wife for our anniversary, I told her, showing her a photo of Harper from my phone. She mentioned staying here a few weeks ago for a work retreat, and she loved it. I was hoping to book the same room. Brenda's face lit up. Oh, the pretty blonde. She's been here several times, always with that handsome fellow. Colin, I think his name was. Such a lovely couple. Very affectionate. She showed me to room 12, a corner unit with a view of the lake. This is their favorite. I always keep it ready when she calls. I booked the room for the following weekend and left Brenda a generous tip for her help. On the way out, I noticed the security camera positioned over the front desk. The angle would capture everyone who checked in. That afternoon, I visited Harper's office. Her assistant, a nervous 22-year-old named Emma, was holding down the fort while Harper dealt with her personal emergency. Mr. Voss? Emma looked relieved to see me. Is Harper feeling better? The Ashford wedding is this Saturday, and the bride has been calling every hour. She's much better, I lied smoothly. In fact, she asked me to pick up some files from her desk, the Morrison contract and the vendor contact list. Emma led me to Harper's private office, a shrine to her success decorated with photos from dozens of perfect weddings. While she searched for the files, I plugged a small USB drive into Harper's computer. The device was designed to copy email accounts and cloud storage, something I'd bought online for backing up important business data. Here we go, Emma said, handing me a folder. Will Harper be back tomorrow? Mrs. Ashford is getting really anxious. Absolutely. She'll call Mrs. Ashford first thing in the morning. The USB drive finished copying Harper's digital life in less than 2 minutes. I pocketed it and left Emma to deal with the increasingly frantic calls from weekend brides. That evening, I spread everything out in my workshop like evidence in a murder investigation. Harper's emails, Colin's social media profiles, hotel receipts, and a timeline of their affair that stretched back 4 months. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd imagined. Harper hadn't just been sleeping with Colin. She'd been planning to leave me for him. The emails revealed discussions about Colin divorcing Stephanie and Harper ending our marriage after a reasonable period of separation. They'd even looked at apartments together, though Harper wanted to wait until after wedding season to avoid damaging her business reputation. I was a placeholder, a convenient husband to maintain her image while she orchestrated her exit strategy. The rage that filled me then was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was clean and focused, like a laser cutting through steel. Harper had reduced our marriage to a business decision, calculating the optimal time to trade up for a newer model. But she'd made one critical error in her planning. She'd forgotten that I was very, very good at building things. And sometimes, the most beautiful constructions required tearing down what came before. I started with Colin's fiancée. Using my fake email account, I sent Stephanie Morrison a simple message. I thought you should know that your fiancé has been having an affair with a married woman. I have proof if you're interested. She responded within an hour. Who is this? What kind of proof? I attached 3 photos I'd found in Harper's cloud storage. Colin and Harper kissing in the parking lot of the Lakeside Inn, Colin's hand on Harper's ass as they walked into the motel, and a particularly intimate selfie Harper had taken in bed with Colin's sleeping form visible beside her. Stephanie's response was a single word. Bastard. Then I called the Lakeside Inn and asked for Brenda. "Hi, this is Colin Dray. I need to cancel my reservation for this weekend. Something's come up." "Oh, that's too bad, Mr. Dray. Should I let Harper know when she calls?" "Actually, could you do me a favor? Don't mention that I canceled. I want to surprise her." Brenda thought this was wonderfully romantic and promised to keep my secret. Wednesday morning, Harper finally came home. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing the same clothes she'd left in. Kelsey's couch had apparently not been kind to her. "Can we talk?" she asked, standing in our kitchen like a stranger. I was making coffee, moving with deliberate calm. "Of course, coffee. Please." She sat at the table, in the same chair where I'd confronted her 3 days earlier. "I've been thinking about what you said, about choices. And I want to choose us. I want to choose our marriage." Her voice was small, uncertain. "I called Colin yesterday and told him it was over." I poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her. "That's good to hear. I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her fingers were cold. "I love you, Landon. I know I have a funny way of showing it, but you're the best man I've ever known. Colin was just a mistake, a stupid, selfish mistake." I looked into her eyes, those beautiful blue eyes that had convinced me to propose 18 months ago, and saw exactly what she was doing. Harper was good at reading people, and she'd calculated that contrition was her best strategy. Apologize, promise to change, wait for me to forgive her, then gradually return to normal. She had no idea that I'd read every email, seen every photo, knew about every lie she'd told over the past 4 months. "I appreciate you saying that," I told her, "and I want to believe you, but trust isn't something you can just decide to rebuild. It has to be earned." "I know. I'll do whatever you need me to do." "Good, because I have some conditions." Harper straightened in her chair, and I saw a flash of her old confidence. She thought she was negotiating from a position of strength. "First, you're going to transfer all your business accounts to a joint login that I can monitor. If we're rebuilding trust, that means transparency." She nodded reluctantly. "Second, you're going to give me your phone every night before bed. I want to see who you're talking to and what you're saying." "Landon, that seems a little extreme. You slept with another man in a motel room while I was home planning our anniversary dinner. I think a little oversight is reasonable." Harper flinched but nodded again. "Third, you're going to tell me exactly what happened between you and Colin. All of it. When it started, how many times you met, what you talked about, what you did. I want the whole truth." "Do we really need to?" "Yes, we do." I leaned forward, letting her see the steel in my eyes. "Because right now, I only know what I've figured out on my own, and my imagination is probably worse than the reality. So you can either tell me the truth, or you can pack your bags and go back to Kelsey's." Harper spent the next 2 hours confessing to 4 months of emotional and physical infidelity. She tried to minimize it. It only happened 3 times. It didn't mean anything. I was confused about my feelings. But I pushed for details until I had a complete picture of her betrayal. By the time she finished, we were both emotionally drained. Harper was crying again, and I was fighting the urge to throw her out of the house immediately. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Landon." "I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix this. Actions fix this." I stood up and walked to the kitchen window. Mrs. Partridge was outside again, pruning her roses with the precision of a surgeon. "There's something else," I said without turning around. "Colin's engaged, right?" "Yes, but does his fiancée know about you?" Harper was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think so." "Then you're going to tell her." "What?" I turned back to face her. "You're going to call Stephanie Morrison and tell her that her fiancé has been cheating on her, today." "Landon, I can't do that. It would destroy her. It would give her the truth, something you seem to have trouble with." Harper's tears had stopped, and I could see her mind working. What if she tells people? What if it gets back to my clients? And there it was, Harper's real concern. Not the pain she'd caused me, not the woman whose life she'd helped destroy, but the potential damage to her precious reputation. "That's a risk you'll have to take," I said, "unless you'd prefer I call her myself." "No." Harper's voice was sharp. "No, I'll do it." She made the call that afternoon, with me sitting beside her to make sure she went through with it. Stephanie Morrison listened in silence as Harper confessed to the affair, then hung up without saying a word. "There," Harper said, setting down the phone. "Are you satisfied?" I almost laughed. Satisfied. I was just getting started. That night, Harper gave me her phone as promised. I scrolled through her messages, deleted Colin's contact information, and blocked his number. Then I installed a tracking app that would let me monitor her location and communications. "This feels like prison," Harper said, watching me work. "No," I corrected. "Prison is where people go when they get caught committing crimes. This is marriage counseling with technology." Harper went to bed early, claiming exhaustion. I stayed up late in my workshop, reviewing the intelligence I'd gathered and planning my next moves. Because Harper might have chosen to end her affair, but she'd only done it because she got caught. The emails I'd read made it clear that she'd been planning to leave me anyway, once the timing was more convenient for her career. She'd made a calculation that our marriage was worth preserving, at least for now, but calculations could change. And when they did, I wanted to be ready. I pulled out a legal pad and started making lists. Harper's clients, her business contacts, her social circle, Colin's professional network, his fiance's friends, the vendors and contractors who worked with both of them. In landscape architecture, you learn that everything is connected. Water flows downhill, roots spread underground, and what happens in one part of the system affects everything else. Harper and Colin had built their affair in secret, thinking they could control the damage when it inevitably came to light. They were about to learn that some gardens grow better in the dark. The Ashford wedding was scheduled for Saturday at Moonrise Manor, the most exclusive venue in 3 counties. Harper had been planning it for 8 months, and it represented the kind of high-profile event that could make or break a wedding planner's reputation. On Friday afternoon, I drove to the venue under the pretense of delivering the custom floral arrangements I'd designed for the ceremony. Moonrise Manor was a restored 19th century estate with manicured gardens that I'd actually helped design 3 years earlier. The owners, Richard and Patricia Moonrise, were old clients who trusted my work implicitly. "Landon," Patricia greeted me at the service entrance. "These arrangements are absolutely stunning. Harper is so lucky to have you." If she only knew. "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect," I said, helping the staff carry in the elaborate centerpieces. "This is Harper's biggest wedding of the season." I spent an hour positioning the arrangements and making final adjustments to the garden lighting. During that time, I also planted something else. A small Bluetooth speaker hidden among the flowers at the head table, synced to a burner phone I'd purchased specifically for this purpose. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect September weather that made Maine famous. Harper left early to supervise the setup, her confidence restored after successfully managing the week's other events. She'd convinced herself that our marriage was back on track, that her confession and promises had fixed everything. I waited until noon, then drove to Moonrise Manor as a guest. I'd told Harper I wanted to see her work, to support her during this important event. She'd been so grateful for the gesture that she'd almost cried. The ceremony was beautiful, I had to admit. Harper had outdone herself with the decorations, the timing, the seamless coordination of vendors and staff. 200 guests witnessed the perfect union of Brad Ashford, heir to a shipping fortune, and Melissa Crawford, whose family owned a chain of luxury hotels. I sat in the back, watching Harper orchestrate the event with military precision. She was in her element, radiating the kind of confidence that had first attracted me to her. For a moment, I almost felt guilty about what I was planning to do. Almost. The reception began at 6, with cocktails in the garden, followed by dinner in the main ballroom. I mingled with the other guests, making small talk and waiting for the right moment. Harper was everywhere at once, solving problems and ensuring that every detail met her exacting standards. At 7:30, the wedding party was introduced to thunderous applause. The bride and groom took their places at the head table, flanked by their parents and closest friends. Harper stood at the edge of the room, beaming with pride at her perfect creation. I pulled out the burner phone and opened the audio file I'd prepared. A compilation of Harper's most intimate voicemails to Colin, edited together into a 3-minute highlight reel of betrayal and lust. The toast began with the best man, a college friend of Brad's who told embarrassing stories about the groom's bachelor party. Then the maid of honor shared memories of the bride's childhood. Finally, Brad's father stood to welcome Melissa to the family. That's when I pressed play. Harper's voice filled the ballroom through the hidden speaker, crystal clear and unmistakably hers. "Colin, I can't stop thinking about yesterday. The way you touched me, the way you made me feel. Landon could never make me feel like that. I know we're both engaged to other people, but what we have is real. I love you, and I want to be with you, no matter what it costs." The room went silent. 200 people sat frozen, wine glasses halfway to their lips, as my wife's voice continued to describe her affair in graphic detail. "I'm going to leave him after wedding season. We can be together, just like we planned. I'll tell Landon I need space, that I'm not ready for marriage. He'll never know about us." Harper's face had gone white. She was staring at the head table in horror, frantically trying to locate the source of the audio. Several guests had turned to look at her, recognition dawning on their faces. "Meet me at our usual place tomorrow. Wear that thing I like, the black one. I want to show you how much I missed you." I ended the recording there and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The ballroom remained silent for another 10 seconds, then exploded into whispered conversations and shocked exclamations. Harper ran from the room. I found her in the parking lot, sitting in her car and sobbing into her hands. I knocked on the window, and she looked up with mascara streaming down her cheeks. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed as soon as she rolled down the window. "You've destroyed everything." "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "Those were your words, Harper. Your voice, your choices. You recorded my private messages. You left them on your laptop, the one you gave me the password to, remember? Back when we trusted each other." Harper's phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts. Word was already spreading through the tight-knit community of wedding vendors and socialites. By tomorrow, everyone would know that Harper Elling Voss had cheated on her husband and planned to abandon him. "My business is ruined," she whispered. "Your business was built on creating perfect moments for other people's marriages. It seems fitting that it would end when people found out how little you value marriage yourself." Harper started the car with shaking hands. "I can't go home. I can't face you right now." That's probably for the best. I'm sure Kelsey will let you stay with her again." She drove away without another word, leaving me standing in the parking lot of her ruined career. I went back inside to find the reception in chaos. The bride was crying, the groom was furious, and the parents were demanding explanations. Patricia Moonrise found me near the bar. "Landon, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about Harper, and was that really her voice?" "I'm afraid so. I only found out about the affair this week." Patricia's expression softened with sympathy. "You poor man. And to find out in such a public way?" I let her assume that I'd been as surprised as everyone else. Within an hour, half the guests had left, and the Ashford family was threatening to sue Harper for emotional distress and ruining their daughter's wedding. Sunday morning brought a flood of cancellations to Harper's business. I know because I was monitoring her email account, watching as client after client terminated their contracts and demanded refunds. The recording had gone viral on social media, shared by guests who'd filmed it on their phones. Harper called me around noon, her voice hoarse from crying. "Landon, please, we need to talk. I've lost everything." "You lost everything the moment you decided to cheat on me," I replied. "The rest is just consequences. I know I hurt you, but this is cruel. You've destroyed my life." "No, Harper, I've revealed your life. There's a difference." She hung up on me. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Colin Dray stood on my front porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive suit was wrinkled. "We need to talk," he said. I invited him in, curious to see what Harper's ex-lover wanted to discuss. "You're a vindictive bastard," Colin began without preamble. "What you did to Harper was unforgivable." "What I did to Harper? That's interesting. Tell me, Colin, what exactly did I do?" "You humiliated her in front of 200 people. You destroyed her business, her reputation, her life." I poured myself a glass of bourbon and didn't offer him one. I played a recording of her own words. If she's humiliated, it's because her actions were humiliating. If her business is destroyed, it's because her clients don't want to hire someone who lies and cheats. Colin's face was red with anger. "She's in love with me. We're going to be together." "Really? That's funny, because I heard from Stephanie Morrison that your engagement is still on. Apparently Harper's confession convinced her that you were the victim of a predatory married woman who seduced you. She's forgiven you completely." The color drained from Colin's face. "That's not—" "Harper said she talked to Stephanie." "She did, but Harper's not nearly as good at manipulation as she thinks she is. Stephanie believes that Harper pursued you, that you tried to resist but couldn't help yourself. Harper played right into every stereotype about the evil other woman." Colin sat down heavily on my couch. "Stephanie wants to move up the wedding. She thinks getting married will protect us from future temptation." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "So you have a choice to make," I continued. "You can marry Stephanie and live happily ever after, or you can throw away your engagement for a woman whose career I just destroyed and who's about to lose everything she's worked for. You're sick. I'm practical. Harper made her choice when she decided to cheat. Now everyone else gets to make theirs." Colin left without another word. Through the window, I watched him sit in his car for 10 minutes before driving away. Monday brought more fallout. The local newspaper ran a story about the wedding planner scandal, complete with quotes from horrified guests and industry experts discussing the damage to Harper's reputation. 3 more clients canceled their contracts, and 2 vendors terminated their relationships with her company. Harper called again that evening. "I'm going to lose the house," she said without preamble. "Without the business income, I can't make the mortgage payments. The house is in both our names. You'll lose half the house." "Landon, please. I know you're angry, but we can work this out. We can go to counseling, start over." "Start over?" "Harper, you spent 4 months planning to leave me for another man. You told your friends that I was inadequate in bed. You made me into a joke." "I was confused. I made mistakes." "No, you made choices. Calculated, deliberate choices. The only thing you're sorry about is getting caught." Harper was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that you can't treat people like disposable objects and expect them to forgive you when it becomes convenient. So this is revenge? This is justice." I hung up and poured another bourbon. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Partridge working in her garden under the porch light, probably listening to every word of our conversation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Harper would probably try to salvage her business, maybe even attempt to reconcile with me again. Colin would have to choose between his fiancée and his mistress, and I would continue building my masterpiece of destruction, one careful move at a time. Because Harper had taught me something valuable about marriage. It's not about love or commitment or shared dreams. It's about power, and who has the strength to use it when everything falls apart. I'd spent 18 months being the devoted husband, the supportive partner, the man who worshipped the ground she walked on. Now it was time to show her what I could build when properly motivated. The next phase of my plan required patience and precision. Harper was wounded, but not defeated, and wounded animals were often the most dangerous. I needed to be careful not to underestimate her capacity for counterattack. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected development. I was in my workshop, reviewing the Morrison landscape plans, when Detective Ray Reynolds knocked on my door. Reynolds was a 15-year veteran of the local police force, the kind of cop who'd seen enough small-town drama to be skeptical of everyone's motives. "Morning, Landon. Got a minute?" "Of course. Coffee?" "Thanks." Reynolds settled into the chair across from my desk, his sharp eyes taking in the organized chaos of my workspace. "Hell of a thing at the Ashford wedding. I heard the recording went viral." "So I'm told. I haven't been following social media much lately." Reynolds nodded sympathetically. "Can't blame you. Must be tough, finding out about your wife's affair in such a public way." I kept my expression neutral. It wasn't how I would have chosen to learn about it. "I bet. Thing is, I got a call yesterday from Colin Dray. He seems to think you orchestrated the whole thing. Claims you planted some kind of recording device at the wedding." "That's an interesting theory. Did he have any evidence?" "None whatsoever. But he was pretty worked up about it. Kept saying you were trying to destroy his life." I sipped my coffee and waited. Reynolds was fishing, trying to see if I'd volunteer any incriminating information. "Funny thing about Colin," Reynolds continued. "He's got quite a reputation around town. This isn't the first time he's been involved with a married woman. Makes you wonder why he's so upset about this particular affair coming to light." "Maybe because this time someone fought back." Reynolds smiled. "Maybe so. Anyway, I told him that playing someone's voicemails in public might be embarrassing, but it's not illegal, especially if those voicemails were left on equipment you have legal access to." "Harper and I share a laptop. Shared, I guess?" "Right. So even if someone did deliberately play those recordings, which would be pretty clever, by the way, there's no crime here. Just a marriage falling apart in a very public way." Reynolds finished his coffee and stood to leave. "Word of advice, though. Be careful. Harper's got friends, and some of them have money and influence. They might try to make trouble for you." After he left, I considered his warning. Harper's social circle included some of the wealthiest families in the area, people who were used to getting their way through intimidation and legal pressure. I'd need to be more careful going forward. That afternoon, I received a call from Emma, Harper's assistant. "Mr. Voss, I'm sorry to bother you, but I don't know what to do. Harper hasn't been in the office since Saturday, and we've got 3 weddings this weekend. The vendors are calling, the brides are panicking, and I don't have access to any of the planning files." "Where is Harper?" "I think she's staying with Kelsey, but she's not answering her phone, and Kelsey just hangs up when I call." I drove to Harper's office, a converted Victorian house downtown that she'd spent 2 years renovating into the perfect creative space. Emma met me at the door, looking frazzled and exhausted. "Thank God you're here. I've been fielding calls all morning. The Morrison wedding is Saturday, and the florist needs to confirm the final arrangements. The Patterson rehearsal dinner is Friday, and the caterer wants to know about dietary restrictions. And Mrs. Chen called 3 times about her daughter's engagement party. I followed Emma into Harper's private office, where chaos reigned. Files were scattered across the desk, her computer was locked, and the phone was ringing constantly. Emma, I need you to listen carefully. Harper's business is finished. After what happened Saturday night, no one's going to hire her to plan their wedding. The best thing you can do is start looking for another job. Emma's face crumpled. But what about the clients? What about the weddings this weekend? The clients will have to make other arrangements. As for the weddings, I paused, considering the possibilities. Let me make some calls. I spent the next 2 hours contacting Harper's vendors and subcontractors, explaining the situation and offering to help coordinate the weekend events. Most of them were sympathetic. They'd heard about the scandal and understood that Harper was in no condition to work. By evening, I'd managed to salvage 2 of the 3 weddings by connecting the brides directly with the vendors and providing detailed timelines from Harper's files. The 3rd bride, Mrs. Chen, was furious and threatening to sue for breach of contract. Let her sue, I told Emma as we locked up the office. Harper's got bigger problems than an angry mother-in-law. Wednesday brought news that Colin had indeed chosen his fiancée over Harper. Stephanie Morrison announced their engagement party on social media, complete with photos of a massive diamond ring and gushing captions about overcoming obstacles together. The subtext was clear. Colin was staying with his meal ticket, and Harper was left with nothing. I was actually impressed by Stephanie's strategy. She'd managed to spin Colin's affair into a romantic narrative about their love conquering temptation. Colin probably thought he'd gotten away with everything. He was wrong. That evening, I drove to the Lakeside Inn with a manila envelope full of photographs. I'd printed every image from Harper's cloud storage, pictures of her and Colin in bed, kissing in parking lots, holding hands over romantic dinners. The timestamps showed that the affair had been going on for months, long before Harper's supposed seduction of innocent Colin. I found Brenda working the night shift, as I'd hoped. "Mr. Dray," she exclaimed when she saw me. "I was so sorry to hear about your troubles with that woman. I saw the news about her wedding scandal. Terrible business." I let her maintain the fiction that I was Colin. "Actually, Brenda, I need your help with something. That woman, Harper, she's been threatening me, saying she'll tell my fiancé that I let her on, that I promised to leave Stephanie for her." Brenda's face hardened. "That's awful. Some women have no shame." "I was hoping you might be willing to talk to my fiancé. Tell her the truth about what you observed." Harper was always the one initiating contact, making the reservations, pushing for more meetings. I tried to break it off several times, but she wouldn't let go. "Of course I'll help. That poor girl deserves to know the truth." I gave Brenda Stephanie's contact information and left the envelope of photos with her. "These might help corroborate your story. Harper took them without my knowledge, another example of her obsessive behavior." Brenda promised to call Stephanie the next morning. I drove home feeling satisfied with the evening's work. Thursday brought the inevitable confrontation. Harper appeared at my workshop around noon, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual perfect grooming had given way to unwashed hair, no makeup, and clothes that looked like she'd slept in them. "You bastard," she said without preamble. "You destroyed my business, and now you're going after Colin too." "I don't know what you mean." Stephanie called me this morning. Apparently some motel clerk contacted her with evidence that I was stalking Colin, that I forced him into the affair. She had photos, Landon. Photos that could only have come from my private files. I looked up from my sketches with mild interest. "That sounds like quite a story. What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. That Colin pursued me, that he told me he loved me, that he wanted to leave her for me, but she wouldn't listen. She said I was a delusional homewrecker who couldn't accept that he'd chosen his real fiancé over me." Harper was pacing now, her hands shaking with rage. "She's telling everyone that I'm some kind of psycho stalker. Colin won't even take my calls anymore. He sent me a text saying that if I contact him again, he'll get a restraining order." "I'm sorry to hear that. It must be difficult to realize that someone you trusted was just using you." "He wasn't using me. He loved me." "Did he? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Colin got exactly what he wanted. A few months of exciting affair with a married woman, followed by a dramatic reconciliation with his wealthy fiancé. He's probably planning to dine out on this story for years." The time I was nearly seduced by a crazy wedding planner. Harper stopped pacing and stared at me. "Hey, you did this. You orchestrated all of it." "I didn't make you cheat, Harper. I didn't make you fall in love with a man who was never going to leave his fiancée. I didn't make you record those voicemails or take those photos. All I did was make sure the truth came to light." "The truth? You've twisted everything. You've made me look like some desperate woman who threw herself at a man who didn't want her." "Isn't that exactly what happened?" Harper slapped me then, hard enough to snap my head to the side. I touched my cheek and smiled. "Feel better?" "I hate you," she whispered. "I know, but hate is honest, at least. It's more than I got from you during our marriage." Harper left without another word. I watched her drive away, then returned to my work. The Morrison landscape project was nearly finished, and I wanted to complete the final drawings before the weekend. That evening, Mrs. Partridge called with an update on the neighborhood gossip. "I saw Harper here earlier. She looked terrible, poor thing. Though I suppose she brought it on herself." I suppose she did. "The whole town's talking about it, you know. Most people seem to think she got what she deserved. Cheating on a nice man like you, planning to run off with that real estate fellow. Some folks are saying Colin's no better. But at least he's staying with his fiancée." People love a redemption story. Indeed they do. Oh, and Landon, I wanted you to know. If anyone asks, I'll tell them what a good husband you were to that girl. How you worked so hard to make her happy. How you never raised your voice or showed anything but kindness. It's important that people know the truth. Mrs. Partridge hung up, leaving me to contemplate the power of narrative. In the span of a week, I'd transformed Harper from a successful businesswoman into a cautionary tale about the dangers of female ambition and infidelity. Meanwhile, I remained the sympathetic victim, the devoted husband who'd been blindsided by his wife's betrayal. The truth was more complicated, but truth was rarely as compelling as a good story. Friday brought the final piece of my immediate revenge. Harper's remaining clients had organized a class action lawsuit, claiming breach of contract and demanding refunds for deposits. Her business insurance wouldn't cover the claims because the policy excluded damages resulting from criminal or immoral conduct. Harper would lose everything, her business, her reputation, her savings, and probably her half of our house when she couldn't make the mortgage payments. But I wasn't finished yet. Because Harper had taught me something important about destruction. It wasn't enough to tear something down. You had to make sure it could never be rebuilt. And I was very, very good at permanent solutions. Harper's lawyer called me on Friday afternoon. Janet Morrison, no relation to Stephanie, was a sharp-edged woman in her 50s who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She'd represented half the wealthy wives in town during their messy separations, and her reputation for ruthless tactics was legendary. "Mr. Voss, I'm calling to discuss the terms of your separation from Harper. We're not separated. We're having marital difficulties. Don't play games with me. My client is prepared to file for divorce on grounds of mental cruelty and emotional abuse. She's documented a pattern of controlling behavior, surveillance, and public humiliation that any judge would find disturbing." I leaned back in my chair, impressed despite myself. Harper was fighting back, trying to rewrite the narrative to make me the villain. "That's an interesting strategy. Tell me, what evidence does she have of this alleged abuse?" "The recording device you planted at the Ashford wedding, the invasion of her privacy by accessing her personal files, the deliberate destruction of her business and reputation, the coordination with third parties to harass and intimidate her." "You mean the recording of her own voicemails, played from files on a computer she gave me access to? The business that collapsed when her clients learned she was cheating on her husband? The third parties who received information about her affair from her own mouth?" Janet was quiet for a moment. "Nevertheless, my client is prepared to seek a restraining order if you continue this campaign of harassment. Your client is welcome to try, but she might want to consider what would happen during the court proceedings. All those voicemails and photos would become public record. The affair would be documented in legal filings that reporters could access. Is she really prepared for that level of scrutiny? What do you want, Mr. Voss?" "I want Harper to take responsibility for her actions. I want her to stop playing the victim and admit that she destroyed our marriage through her own choices. And if she does that, then maybe we can discuss a quiet divorce with an equitable division of assets." Janet hung up without committing to anything, but I could hear the calculation in her voice. Harper's position was weaker than she'd hoped, and any legal strategy that brought more attention to the affair would backfire. That evening, I drove to Kelsey's house to retrieve some of Harper's belongings. Kelsey lived in a converted carriage house behind her parents' mansion, a trust fund baby who'd never worked a real job in her life. She'd been Harper's enabler and co-conspirator, always encouraging her worst impulses. Kelsey met me at the door with undisguised hostility. "She doesn't want to see you." "I'm not here to see her. I'm here to drop off some clothes and personal items." "You can leave them with me." "Actually, I'd prefer to give them to Harper directly. We need to discuss some practical matters." Kelsey reluctantly let me inside. The carriage house was decorated in the kind of shabby chic style that cost more than most people's cars, all distressed furniture and artfully arranged antiques. Harper was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket and staring at her laptop screen. She looked up when I entered, and I was struck by how much she'd changed in just a week. The confident, polished woman I'd married had been replaced by someone who looked defeated and hollow. "I brought some of your things," I said, setting a suitcase by the door. "Thank you," Harper said quietly. "We should also talk about the house. The mortgage payment is due next week." "I can't make the payment. I don't have any income." "I know, so we have a few options. We can sell the house and split the proceeds. I can buy out your half, or you can sign a quitclaim deed and walk away." Kelsey stepped forward. "She's not signing anything without her lawyer present." I ignored her and focused on Harper. "Janet Morrison called me today. She seems to think you have grounds for a favorable divorce settlement." "Do I?" "That depends on how much public scrutiny you're willing to endure. Divorce proceedings are public record, Harper. Every detail of your affair would be documented in court filings. Every lie you told, every hotel receipt, every intimate photo. Is that really what you want?" Harper's face went pale. "You'd do that? You'd humiliate me even more than you already have?" "I'd tell the truth. If that's humiliating, it's because your actions were humiliating." Kelsey moved protectively closer to Harper. "You're a monster. She made one mistake, and you're destroying her entire life." I turned to face Kelsey for the first time. One mistake? She had a 4-month affair. She planned to leave me for another man. She mocked our marriage to her friends and discussed our private life in public. Which part of that was the one mistake? She was unhappy. She felt trapped. Then she should have asked for a divorce instead of cheating. Harper finally spoke up. "What do you want from me, Landon? What would it take for you to stop?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that you can't treat people like disposable objects and expect them to forgive you when it becomes convenient. I've lost everything. My business, my reputation, my friends. Isn't that enough?" I looked around Kelsey's expensive carriage house, at the designer clothes and luxury accessories that Harper's wealthy friend provided. "You've lost some things, but you still have people willing to support you, to make excuses for your behavior, to help you avoid taking responsibility." "So what? You want me to be homeless and friendless?" "I want you to be honest, with yourself, if not with me." Harper was quiet for a long moment. "I was honest with you. I confessed everything, told you about Colin, agreed to your conditions. You confessed because you got caught. You agreed to my conditions because you thought they were temporary. The emails I read made it clear that you were planning to leave me anyway, once wedding season was over." Harper's eyes widened. "You read my emails?" "All of them. The ones where you and Colin discussed apartments. The ones where you planned your exit strategy. The ones where you calculated the optimal timing for maximum financial benefit." Kelsey gasped. "Harper, you never told me about any of that." Harper shot her friend a warning look, but the damage was done. Even Kelsey was beginning to understand the scope of Harper's deception. "I was confused," Harper said weakly. "I didn't know what I wanted." "You knew exactly what you wanted. You wanted Colin, and you wanted to keep me as a backup plan until you were sure he'd leave his fiancée for you." "That's not true." "Then explain the apartment listings. Explain the discussions about timing your divorce announcement. Explain the financial calculations about alimony and asset division." Harper couldn't explain any of it, because there was no explanation that didn't reveal her as calculating and manipulative. I left them to contemplate the implications of Harper's deeper deceptions. As I drove home, I reflected on the strange satisfaction of watching Harper's support system crumble. Even her closest friend was beginning to see through the victim narrative. Saturday brought unexpected news. Colin Dray and Stephanie Morrison had eloped, flying to Vegas for a quick ceremony that avoided the scrutiny of a local wedding. The announcement appeared on social media with photos of the happy couple and captions about choosing love over drama. I had to admire Stephanie's strategy. By marrying Colin immediately, she'd removed any possibility of him changing his mind about Harper. She'd also reinforced the narrative that Harper was the problem, the unstable element that had threatened their relationship. Colin was now safely married to his wealthy fiancée, probably convinced that he'd escaped Harper's clutches through his own cleverness. He had no idea that I'd orchestrated his escape, that every choice he'd made had been guided by information I'd provided. Sunday morning brought a surprise visitor. Harper stood on my front porch, alone this time, looking more composed than she had in days. "Can we talk? Without the lawyers, without the friends, just us?" I let her into the kitchen and made coffee while she gathered her thoughts. "I've been thinking about what you said, about taking responsibility. And? You're right. I did plan to leave you. I was in love with Colin, and I thought he was going to leave Stephanie for me. I convinced myself that our marriage was a mistake, that I'd settled for someone safe instead of someone I was passionate about. It was the first completely honest thing she'd said since I'd confronted her about the affair. Thank you for saying that. But I need you to understand something, too. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was being kind by waiting, by not disrupting your life until I was sure about what I wanted. You thought lying to me for months was kind? I thought it was kinder than asking for a divorce and then changing my mind. I could see the logic in her reasoning, even if I disagreed with it. Harper had always been someone who tried to control outcomes, to manage other people's emotions and reactions. What do you want now? I asked. I want to end this. The fighting, the lawyers, the public humiliation. I want to sign whatever papers you need me to sign and move on with my life. And go where? Do what? I don't know yet. Maybe leave Maine, start over somewhere else. Kelsey has family in California who might help me get back on my feet. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but Harper seemed genuinely defeated, ready to accept whatever terms I offered. I'll have my lawyer draw up divorce papers. You can keep your personal belongings and your car. I'll buy out your half of the house at current market value, minus the outstanding mortgage balance. That's fair. There's one more condition. Harper tensed. What? I want a written statement acknowledging that you had an affair, that you planned to leave me for Colin Dray, and that the breakdown of our marriage was entirely due to your infidelity, something that could be used if you ever try to change your story in the future. You want me to sign a confession? I want documentation of the truth. Harper was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup. If I do this, will you stop? No more public humiliation? No more sabotaging my attempts to rebuild my life? If you're honest about what happened and accept responsibility for your choices, then yes, we can both move forward. Okay, I'll do it. She signed the statement that afternoon, in the presence of a notary who'd known us both since we were married. The document was simple and straightforward. Harper acknowledged her affair with Colin Dray, admitted to planning to leave me for him, and accepted full responsibility for the breakdown of our marriage. As she signed her name, I felt something shift inside me. The anger that had driven me for the past 2 weeks was finally beginning to fade, replaced by a strange sense of closure. Harper handed me the signed document. Are we done now? We're done. She left that evening, taking only what she could fit in her car. I watched from the kitchen window as she loaded her suitcases, remembering the day she'd moved in with such excitement and optimism. Mrs. Partridge appeared at her garden gate as Harper drove away for the last time. End of an era, the old woman called out. Beginning of a new one, I replied. That night, I sat in my workshop surrounded by the plans and projects that had sustained me through the worst period of my life. The Morrison landscape was finished, ready for installation next week. The Henderson garden renovation was scheduled for October. The Blackwood Estate project would keep me busy through the winter. My business would survive Harper's scandal. In fact, it might even benefit from the sympathy and support I'd received from clients and colleagues. People respected a man who handled betrayal with dignity and quiet strength. Harper's business was finished, her reputation destroyed, her marriage ended. Colin was safely married to his wealthy fiancée, probably congratulating himself on escaping the crazy woman who'd tried to steal him away, and I was free to build whatever came next. But as I sat there in the quiet of my workshop, I realized that revenge, no matter how perfectly executed, couldn't repair the fundamental damage that had been done. Harper's betrayal had changed something essential about how I viewed relationships, trust, and love. I'd won completely, but the victory felt hollow. Maybe that was the real lesson Harper had taught me, that some things, once broken, could never be truly fixed. You could clear away the debris, level the ground, and start building again, but the foundation would always bear the scars of what had come before. I poured myself a bourbon and raised the glass in a toast to my absent wife. Thank you, Harper, for teaching me exactly what I'm capable of when someone tries to destroy my life. The bourbon burned going down, but it was a clean burn, like cauterizing a wound. Outside, Mrs. Partridge was still working in her garden under the porch light, tending to plants that would bloom again next spring. Some things could be rebuilt, after all. 3 months after Harper signed the divorce papers, I received an unexpected phone call that would complete my revenge in ways I'd never imagined. Mr. Voss? This is Detective Sarah Chen from the Portland Police Department. I'm calling about Colin Dray. I set down my coffee and gave her my full attention. What about him? He's been arrested on charges of real estate fraud and embezzlement. During our investigation, we discovered evidence of multiple affairs with married clients. Your ex-wife's name came up in our files, and we were hoping you might be willing to provide some background information." The irony was delicious. Colin's weakness for married women had finally caught up with him, but not in the way anyone expected. "I'd be happy to help," I said. Detective Chen explained that Colin had been running an elaborate scheme for over 2 years, targeting wealthy married women who were unhappy in their marriages. He'd seduce them, gain access to their financial information, and then manipulate property transactions to siphon money into accounts he controlled. "The pattern was always the same," Chen said. "He'd identify a vulnerable target, usually someone with access to significant assets, and begin an affair. Once he had their trust, he'd convince them to make real estate investments or refinance properties in ways that gave him access to their money." "How much money are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate? About $2 million over the past 3 years. He was very good at choosing victims who were too embarrassed about the affairs to report the financial irregularities." Harper had been lucky, in a way. Her affair with Colin had been exposed before he could move to the financial exploitation phase. But other women hadn't been so fortunate. "We found extensive records in his home office," Chen continued. "Photos, recordings, financial documents. It appears he was documenting everything, possibly for blackmail purposes." "Recordings?" "Audio and video, hidden cameras in hotel rooms, recording devices in his car. Your ex-wife appears in several files, though there's no evidence she was aware of being recorded." I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Colin hadn't been the smooth operator he'd pretended to be. He'd been a predator, systematically targeting vulnerable women for financial gain. "Would you be willing to testify about your ex-wife's relationship with Mr. Dray?" Chen asked. "It would help establish the pattern of behavior." "Absolutely." After hanging up, I sat in my workshop contemplating this latest development. Colin's arrest would destroy whatever remained of his reputation and marriage. Stephanie would learn that her husband wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal who'd been using her money to fund his lifestyle while stealing from other women. More importantly, Harper would finally understand what kind of man she'd been willing to destroy her marriage for. Colin hadn't loved her. He'd been evaluating her as a potential mark, calculating how much money he could extract before moving on to the next victim. The phone rang again. This time it was Harper. "Landon? I just saw the news about Colin. Please tell me you didn't have anything to do with this." "I didn't even know about it until the police called me an hour ago." "They called you?" "Apparently Colin kept detailed records of his affairs. You're in his files, Harper. Photos, recordings, financial background checks. The whole works." Harper was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "He recorded us?" "Without your knowledge, yes. The police think he was building blackmail material or evidence for insurance fraud schemes." "Oh, God." Harper's voice was barely a whisper. "What kind of recordings?" "I don't know the details, but Detective Chen seemed to think they were comprehensive." Harper started crying then, the kind of broken sobs that come from complete emotional collapse. "Well, he never loved me, did he? It was all fake." "I'm afraid so. I destroyed my marriage, my business, my entire life for a man who was using me." I could have said something cruel, could have twisted the knife deeper. But listening to Harper's anguish, I felt only pity for the woman who'd been so desperate for passion that she'd fallen for a practiced manipulator. "Harper, are you okay? Do you have someone with you?" "I'm alone. Kelsey stopped speaking to me after she found out about the apartment hunting. She said I'd lied to her too." "Where are you staying?" "A motel in California. I've been working as a waitress, trying to save money for a deposit on an apartment." The image of Harper, former successful businesswoman and social queen, serving tables in a roadside diner was almost too pathetic to contemplate. "Listen to me," I said. "You need to call Detective Chen and tell her everything you remember about Colin. Dates, locations, conversations about money or investments, anything that might help their case." "Why would you want me to help them?" "Because Colin is a predator who destroyed multiple families. Because other women deserve justice. And because maybe helping catch him will give you some sense that something good came from this nightmare." Harper was quiet again. Would you be willing to talk to me? After I speak with the police? I know I have no right to ask, but I don't have anyone else." I considered her request. Harper had lost everything, her business, her marriage, her social circle, her self-respect. She was alone in a strange place, working a minimum wage job, and now discovering that the man she'd sacrificed everything for had been planning to rob her blind. "Call me after you talk to Detective Chen," I said. Harper called back 3 hours later, her voice hoarse from crying and talking. I told them everything, every date, every conversation, every detail I could remember. Colin had asked me about refinancing the house. about investment properties, about your business accounts. I thought he was just making conversation, but now you realize he was casing you for his next score. The detective said I was lucky you found out about the affair when you did. She thinks Colin was planning to convince me to take out loans against the house or liquidate assets for fake investment opportunities. How do you feel about that? Grateful, I guess, and stupid, and ashamed. Harper paused. Landon, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about what you said, about taking responsibility. You were right. I didn't just make mistakes, I made choices. Selfish, destructive choices that hurt everyone around me. Thank you for saying that. I know it doesn't change anything. I know I can't undo the damage I caused. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did to you, to us, was unforgivable. For the first time since discovering Harper's affair, I felt something other than anger or satisfaction. There was sadness there, and loss, and maybe the beginning of genuine forgiveness. Harper, what are your plans? Are you going to stay in California? I don't know. I can't come back to Maine. Everyone knows what I did, but I don't really have anywhere else to go either. What about your family? My parents are ashamed of me. They haven't spoken to me since the scandal broke. My sister thinks I'm toxic and doesn't want me around her kids. Harper had always been proud of her perfect family, her successful parents, her close relationships with her siblings. Learning that they'd cut her off completely was another devastating blow. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I deserve it. I destroyed everything good in my life, chasing after something that was never real. We talked for another hour, the longest conversation we'd had since before I discovered the affair. Harper told me about her life in California. The crappy motel room, the demanding restaurant job, the loneliness of starting over in a place where nobody knew her history. It wasn't the life she'd dreamed of when she was planning to leave me for Colin. It was small and difficult and anonymous, but it was honest in a way her old life had never been. Landon, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think I'll ever be able to forgive myself for this? I considered the question carefully. I think forgiveness is something you earn through your actions, not something you grant yourself through good intentions. If you want to forgive yourself, you need to become someone worthy of forgiveness. How do I do that? By helping other people instead of using them, by telling the truth instead of manipulating it, by building something meaningful instead of tearing down what others have built. Harper was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if I'm capable of that. Then you'll never forgive yourself. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen looking out at the garden I'd planted with Harper during our first spring as a married couple. The roses she'd chosen were still blooming, despite everything that had happened.